The past. It follows us all our lives, haunts us at every step, and everyone decides for himself whether to carry this burden through life or to dump it. My wife didn't shed her past, which is why she ruined our happy marriage. I first encountered Tanner Bishop when we were both playing youth league basketball. He attended a different elementary school than I did. Our teams faced off one Saturday at the boys' club. Tanner was one of those kids who hit puberty early and was 5 or 6 inches taller than the rest of us. Looking back, I think my team actually held its own pretty well against Tanner's team, despite the obvious talent gap. I also noticed that when Tanner's team had a big lead, he started messing around, showing off with behind-the-back passes, three-point shots, and so on. We managed to close the gap a bit, making the game slightly more competitive than it probably should have been. We both ended up at the same high school and joined the freshman football team, which is when I officially met Tanner. As I had observed before, Tanner was big, athletic, and popular on the football field. Naturally, he became the quarterback. I was trying out for the running back position. Our coach used a dual-back system. One of the spots was taken by Nat Whitfield, the fastest kid on the team, while I filled the other. Although I wasn't as fast as Nat, I was a solid blocker, protected Tanner when he passed, was a decent runner, and could catch passes out of the backfield. While Tanner had a flashy style, I was more consistent. On defense, Tanner played middle linebacker, and I was the safety. There were several occasions when Tanner would go for a spectacular sack, and I had to step up from my safety position to cover for him. We were a strong team, and I started hanging out with a group of football players. Naturally, Tanner was at the center of this clique. They say opposites attract, and although Tanner and I had a lot in common, our personalities were quite different. He was the loud, popular, outgoing type, while I was more introverted, steady, and definitely not flashy. Somehow, we became close friends. Tanner was smart, but he didn't always pay attention in class. On many occasions, I found myself sharing my notes or giving him last-minute tutoring sessions to help him prepare for upcoming tests. Usually, his distraction in class was due to some girl. In return for my academic help, I became part of Tanner's social orbit. Whether it was after school, during lunch, or at a high school dance, there always seemed to be a crowd of girls and guys around Tanner. I was closely connected to that social circle. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a nerd, but compared to Tanner, the rest of us seemed a bit less impressive. Through this connection, I found myself part of the popular crowd. During the first few years of high school, neither of us had a girlfriend. We participated in all the usual co-ed social activities, but there were no steady relationships. That changed in junior year. Out of nowhere, and I'm still not sure how it happened, Tanner got a girlfriend, Anna Marie Dubois. Anna attended St. Cecilia's, the Catholic high school across town. The fact that she didn't go to our school and was from a Catholic school added a sense of local exoticness to her. Her looks only enhanced that exotic aura. Anna was about 5 feet 7 inches with dark, nearly black hair. She had olive skin and an attractive, heart-shaped face. Her eyes were slightly almond-shaped, and she had full lips. She was very pretty, but what really impressed me was her figure, shapely, with a slim waist and an athletic, firm physique. The homecoming dance was approaching, and Tanner was, of course, taking the stunning Anna. I didn't have a date. One day, about a week before the dance, Tanner and I were sitting in the cafeteria. "Got a date for the dance next week, Max?" Tanner asked. I sensed there was more to his question. Although I considered him a close friend, maybe even my best friend, it was rare for him to show much interest in my personal life. It was a bit unusual for him to ask about my plans for the dance. "No, not yet," I replied. There were plenty of great girls at our high school, but none had really caught my eye. "In that case, Anna has this friend, Mia. She's really cute, and she's not seeing anyone right now," Tanner suggested. "Tanner, I don't know her, never met her, and she doesn't know me," I said. "But what does she look like?" I asked, intrigued. It turned out that Mia Battle was also a junior at St. Cecilia's. While Anna was athletic and tall, Mia was petite. Where Anna was strikingly beautiful, Mia could be described as cute, small, shapely, and adorable. Our first meeting was at a McDonald's. Tanner and I arrived together, and Mia came with Anna. I guess I passed Mia's physical test as she did mine. The following Saturday, we went to homecoming together, double dating with Tanner and Anna. After the dance that night, I told Mia that I had a great time, and she said she did too. I really liked her. She was fun, funny, and the fact that she went to a different school added a bit of mystery to her at ours. Through Tanner, I found out that she liked me as well, and we started dating. St. Cecilia's had a Christmas formal. Since it was a religious school, they could call it Christmas. At our politically correct high school, anything festive in December had to be called winter. Despite that, the dance was a big deal at St. Cecilia's, and both Tanner and I were invited by our dates. This wasn't just some ordinary high school gym event. It was held in the ballroom of the Hilton downtown. When we walked into the ballroom, Tanner, Anna, Mia, and I wasn't prepared for the hostility from the St. Cecilia's guys. It felt like we were invaders from another village, trying to steal their girls. As we walked through, we got some comments, and I didn't see a single friendly male face. While I was dancing with Mia, a dark-haired, stocky kid cut in. I politely let Mia go for the dance. After 2 dances, she came back to our table. Later, when we were dancing again, the same kid tried to cut in once more. "Michael, I'm dancing with my date, Max," Mia said. "I've already danced with you." "Just one more dance, me," he insisted, moving in and bumping me a bit while staring at her. "Hey," I said, pushing him back. "She doesn't want to dance with you." Suddenly, Michael turned on me, fury and malice in his eyes, and landed a punch right on my chin. I saw stars for a moment but stayed on my feet. Before he could strike again, I tackled him to the ground. Mia was screaming at us, and Michael's friends jumped in. I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me off him. He managed to land a solid kick as they pulled me away. Now, 2 of Michael's friends were holding me by the arms, and he was still coming at me with that same angry look. Just then, Tanner stepped in. I had described Tanner as one of the bigger kids back in middle school, and he still has that imposing presence. He shoved Michael away and ordered his friends to release me. At that moment, one of the chaperones arrived, and the fight, if you could call it that, was officially over. The chaperones conferred, and I noticed one of Michael's friends talking to one of them, likely a parent, who nodded in agreement. The final outcome: Tanner and I were kicked out of the dance. Any attempts to protest were quickly shut down. They had the home field advantage. Mia and Anna graciously left with us. As we walked out, I heard Michael say, "See you later, tough guy." We locked eyes as the 4 of us exited the ballroom. I'm not used to having enemies. Even on the sports field, I always try to be a good sport and shake hands with my opponents, no matter how heated the game gets. This is all new to me. Tanner and Anna were laughing as we left, with Mia holding on to me possessively as we walked out of the Hilton. "It's still early, and we didn't eat much at the dance," Tanner pointed out. "Let's head to Bernie's Cafe," he suggested. We all squeezed into a booth at the cafe and chatted a bit about the dance. "Max, thank you for protecting me," Mia said, hugging me tightly. Tanner and Anna were still chuckling about the fight. "You really handled it like a pro, Tiger," Tanner teased. "Who was that jerk anyway?" he asked. "Just some guy," Mia replied. "A bit more than just some guy," Anna added, before launching into the full story. It turned out the guy, Michael Amesh, had been Mia's boyfriend for most of her sophomore year. Over the summer, she caught him with another girl, and they broke up. Since then, he'd been trying to win her back. "Let's not talk about Michael," Mia interrupted. "You're my boyfriend now," she declared, snuggling up next to me on the bench. Boyfriend. Apparently, all it took was shoving some guy around and taking a punch to upgrade my status from dating to boyfriend. It seemed that the confrontation with Michael Amesh had impressed Mia. She was more attentive and seemed happier to be with me. We spent some time at the cafe, eating and chatting. I hadn't really gotten to know Anna much before, but I noticed she was not just beautiful, but also kind and considerate. She even asked if I was hurt from the fight and seemed genuinely concerned. I reassured her that I was fine. Despite getting kicked out of the dance, we ended up having a pretty good time. It turned out to be fun after all. That night, I started to realize just how much I liked Mia. I saw a different, better side of her, and I might have even started falling in love with her. I could also sense that her feelings for me were growing. I know, just a typical high school romance, but for me, it felt deeper than that. As the weeks went by, I quickly realized that the moments I spent with Mia were the best. Beyond just having fun together, our relationship developed. I got to know her family, and she got to know mine. We did all the usual relationship things: dinners with her family, events with mine, double dates with Tanner and Anna, and lots of other fun, normal activities. We also talked about the future. Junior year is when you start preparing for college, SATs, applications, and campus visits. In my mind, our relationship was a part of that future, but maybe those thoughts weren't as strong for Mia. I was an only child, and I had a close relationship with my parents. Our family wasn't large or bustling. My dad had one sister who lived nearby, and my mom's family was from the Midwest, so we didn't see them often. My dad owned his own insurance agency, John Early Insurance. This summer, I started working at his office from 8 a.m. to noon, 3 days a week. On the other 2 weekdays, I helped out at my Aunt Helen's house. Aunt Helen had never married and lived in my grandparents' old house, which sat on a large lot that was once part of the suburbs. The urban growth boundary had expanded past her property years ago, and newer neighborhoods had sprung up around her. Despite the valuable land, Aunt Helen had no plans to sell. I was close to Aunt Helen, but she was a bit eccentric. She constantly made a low noise. It could have been whispering or humming, but it was always there, just under her breath. I got used to it, though it was a little odd. With all the land she had, there was always something to do. Whenever I came to help, she would give me a list of chores for the day. She was always pleasant and seemed to like me, but she never paid me or thanked me when I finished. Instead, she'd give me an ice cream sandwich before I left. That was it. One day, after returning from Aunt Helen's, I mentioned to my dad, "She never pays me anything." "Don't worry, you'll get paid," he replied. I wondered what he meant by that. Between working at my dad's office, helping Aunt Helen, and training for football on my own, my summer was busy. I still made time for Mia, trying to see her every night if possible, though it usually ended up being a few times a week. In hindsight, things were good between Mia and me, but they weren't really moving forward. At the end of the summer, before football practice started, my family went on a 2-week road trip to California. We took a trip somewhere every year, but this year, I was less excited about it. I knew I'd miss Mia. After returning from vacation, football practice resumed. Tanner and I would drive to practice together, and I realized I hadn't seen much of him over the summer. "How's Anna?" I asked him as we drove home on Monday. "She's in the past," Tanner replied casually. "What?" I exclaimed. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? What happened?" I bombarded him with questions, completely taken aback by the news. "Relax, Max," Tanner laughed at my surprise. "We're going to be seniors. I didn't want to be tied down in my last year of high school," he explained. "But come on, Tanner," I said. "Anna's beautiful and really nice. She's perfect," I declared. "Whoa," he said, glancing at me with a smile. "Sounds like someone has a little crush on Anna?" "Tanner," I said. "It's not like that. I just thought you two were perfect together. I figured you and Anna were in it for the long haul. Max, we're in high school, he said. These high school relationships don't last. There are plenty of girls out there. Sure, Anna is great, but we're way too young to settle down. Maybe in 10 years, but not now, he explained. As we drove home, I silently pondered what he said. I thought about Tanner and all the girls. I thought about Mia and our future. And I also thought about the beautiful Anna. I picked up Mia on Saturday evening after the first full week of football practice. We hadn't had any alone time since before my trip to California with my parents, and I was eager to spend time with her. Mia seemed happy to see me, but a little reserved. I figured it was just a small adjustment after being apart. We drove around, chatting about my vacation and the start of school. Pretty innocent stuff. After dropping her off at home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Perhaps we had been apart for too long, and it might just be a matter of adjustment. The next week, I called her, hoping to restore the comfortable routine we used to have. Yet something still felt wrong. I asked her what was going on. I've just been busy with school and everything, she explained. My mom's been driving me crazy, she added. Got it, I replied, though I could still sense something was amiss. So are we still on for Saturday night? I asked, trying to confirm our usual plans. I'm not sure, she said. I think so. I'll let you know. And that was the end of the conversation. Before I could ask more, she made some excuse and ended the call. Clearly, things were not back to normal. On Saturday morning, with no word from Mia, I tried calling again with no response. I decided to go to her house at the usual time. Her mom answered the door. I had always gotten along with Mrs. Battle, but she looked at me with a puzzled expression. Max, she said. Hi, Mrs. Battle, I replied. Mia's not home, she told me. She seemed like she wanted to say something more, but chose to stay quiet. I'll let Mia know you stopped by, she said, closing the door. I noticed the pitying look she gave me as the door shut. Throughout our relationship, communication had always been strong. If I texted her, she would reply quickly. We would discuss issues, challenges, and small problems openly. This was different. She was clearly shutting me out. For a few moments, I just sat in my car. The Mia I knew and had grown so close to wouldn't have treated me like this. We had talked about the future, coordinating our college plans, and even discussed life after college, including careers, houses, marriage, and children. Clearly, something was changing, but I had no idea what. Eventually, I went home, feeling numb. I told myself I wouldn't call her repeatedly. As much as I wanted to understand what was happening, I refused to be a desperate, pathetic boyfriend who lost his dignity. I resolved not to contact her unless she reached out to me first. I mulled over her actions, the signs, and the unspoken feelings. Unfortunately, the logical conclusion was that we were breaking up, and she hadn't had the decency to officially end things. Our first football game was on Friday against Roosevelt. That week at practice, I was in a fog, distracted, not playing aggressively, and on the verge of being benched. Somehow, I managed to keep my starting position, but barely. We won the game, but it was closer than it should have been. Roosevelt wasn't very strong, and I definitely didn't play well. As the defensive strategist, my poor performance contributed to the game being too close. The following week, communication from Mia was minimal. I grew tired of asking, "What's going on?" or "Are you upset?" I had promised myself not to whine or beg her to talk to me. She simply claimed she was busy. The next week, we lost our game to Regis. We should have beaten them by 2 touchdowns. Last year, we had won 34-10. I reviewed the game and realized my poor performance had contributed to the loss. Our next opponent was St. Cecilia's, a formidable sports powerhouse known for their recruitment of top talent. Our team, Washington, had a bit of a rivalry with the Crusaders. I was curious if Mia would be at the game, as our communication had nearly ceased over the past week. The game began, and they scored almost immediately. We managed to equalize 7-7 by the end of the first quarter. Their offense was spearheaded by their all-league quarterback, Gabriel Dante, and their formidable running back, Michael Ameshe, the same guy I clashed with at the Christmas formal. Amesh was a powerful, straightforward runner. The Crusaders scored again early in the second quarter. Our offense struggled against their tough defense, and as the quarter was winding down, their offense was driving down the field. It was 1st and goal at our 9-yard line. We expected Dante to pass, but instead it was a draw play to Amesh. They double-teamed Tanner, leaving him out of the play. I saw the handoff to Amesh and moved to fill the gap, though hesitantly. Amesh lowered his head as we collided and powered right over me for the touchdown. As I lay on the field, Amesh triumphantly stood over me, taunting. "Hey, tough guy," he jeered. "Not so tough now. Nice tackle. I bet Mia loved watching that play, huh? Tough guy," he added with a laugh, surrounded by his teammates. "Mia?" I thought. What does this have to do with Mia? At halftime in the locker room, we were down 21-7. Tanner stood up to address the team. "We played like shit in the first half," he declared. "We are better than this. That team is not that good. Focus and we will win." He continued, "Do not let this team run over us." With that remark, he stared straight at me. I lowered my head, unable to meet his gaze. The message was unmistakable. Amesh had completely overpowered me. As we were about to leave the locker room for the second half, Tanner pulled me aside. "Max, get your head out of your ass and concentrate," he said. I began to nod in agreement, but he pushed me against the lockers and locked eyes with me. "Mia's back with Amesh," Tanner said. "He's trying to embarrass you in front of her. You have a choice. You can wallow in self-pity, or you can show Amesh that he's in a goddamn football game. Max, you're the smartest guy I know. Get focused," he added. With that, he joined the team on the field. Tanner's words sank deeply into my mind. I had been sulking while Mia was back with Michael Amesh. Amesh had then trampled over me and taunted me, and all I did was feel sorry for myself. A new emotion ignited within me as I ran out for the second half. Anger. Anger at myself, at the Crusaders, at Amesh, but most of all, a deep anger at Mia. We scored immediately at the start of the second half, but then neither team seemed able to sustain an offensive drive. About halfway through the third quarter, I noticed the Crusaders lining up in an unusual formation. I remembered it from the game film. I quickly instructed Nat, our cornerback, to stick with Perkins, their wide receiver, one-on-one. "I'll cover the flat," I said. He looked at me, wide-eyed, and nodded. As the play began, Perkins and Nat dashed past me, and I sped up, heading towards the flat. Just like in a film, Amesh emerged in the flat. Dante's pass was slightly high, causing Amesh to leap to catch it, but he managed to secure the ball. Meanwhile, I was rapidly closing in on him from my free safety position. Everything seemed to slow down for me, even though I was moving at full speed. I observed Amesh jumping and tracking the ball as he attempted to catch it. Instinctively, I knew I had to tackle him low. He had overpowered me the last time I went high, so I avoided that mistake. I saw his left leg firmly planted in the turf, his weight balanced on it with his cleats digging in for a moment. I launched myself at his planted leg with full force. He had no chance. The first sound I heard was the crack of bone and the pop of cartilage, followed by Amesh's scream. Amesh fumbled the ball on impact, and I quickly recovered it, running 57 yards for a touchdown. As I jogged back to my jubilant teammates, I glanced up at the grandstand of St. Cecilia's. I noticed Mia, with her dark hair and tearful eyes, staring down at me. Unable to resist, I gave her a smile. Amesh was carried off the field on a stretcher, which seemed to drain the energy from St. Cecilia's. The final score was 35-24 in favor of Washington. As we lined up to shake hands, a few angry comments were exchanged. The last person in line was someone I knew was a friend of Amesh's. Despite my earlier composure, I was still seething with anger. "Hey, Jordan," I said to Amesh's friend. "Tell Michael I hope he recovers soon," I added with obvious insincerity. "To hell with you, asshole," was his only response. Despite my bravado during the game, Mia's betrayal left me deeply hurt. I had a terrible feeling that it would take a long time for things to improve. They say that indifference is the opposite of love, but for me, it was hatred. My senior year of high school seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, as did my 4 years of college. I had always intended to work with my dad at the insurance office, and I majored in finance. While many of my friends and classmates changed their majors during college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which was a comforting certainty. During the latter part of high school and throughout college, I never had a serious relationship. My experience with Mia left me scarred. I felt betrayed after investing so much emotion and energy into the relationship, only for her to cheat on me. She didn't even have the decency to break up with me properly. This experience taught me not to trust women. I never talked to her about what happened. Tanner gave me a brief update saying that she and Ameche started seeing each other over the summer and things progressed from there. I couldn't understand it, which is why I avoided getting serious with anyone in college. I was afraid of the pain of betrayal. The only satisfaction I found was knowing I had completely ruined Michael Amesh's chances of playing college football. I briefly saw him once, and he was limping. Good. Speaking of college football, Tanner received a scholarship to play for a small college in Texas. We stayed in touch sporadically throughout college, but whenever we spoke, it felt like old times. Tanner decided to major in construction management. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Finance and immersed myself in my work. My dad had a successful business, and I started networking with his clients. I was hardworking, genuine, and tried to be personable. I saw a solid future for myself at John Early Insurance. Then, tragedy struck our family. Aunt Helen passed away quietly in her sleep one April night, just shy of her 60th birthday. Her heart gave out. It was a sorrowful time for us, as we were a small, extended family. During holidays and celebrations, it was usually just my mom and dad, Aunt Helen and me. Her unique and endearing personality would be missed. A few weeks after her passing, my dad and I met with Helen's attorney. For some reason, my dad insisted I accompany him. Helen had left a small investment account to my father, but the surprising part of her will was that her house and all 9.7 acres of prime real estate were left to me. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. As we were leaving the law office, my dad put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Do you remember telling me that Aunt Helen never paid you for all your help?" I nodded in agreement. "Well, son, I think you've just been paid," he told me. I had inherited not only the house and land, but also all of Aunt Helen's belongings. I now viewed the house from a new perspective. Previously, it had been Aunt Helen's place, with floral curtains, china-filled cabinets, and lace doilies. Now it was mine, and it was clear that it needed updating. This was far from a bachelor pad. I had work ahead of me. Between managing the house and my duties at the insurance agency, I was quite occupied. At work, I noticed that Dad was still operating the way he had for the past 25 years. The financial products industry was evolving rapidly. While Dad might hold on to his clients until he retired, for the business to succeed and grow, we needed to embrace change. One of the first things I did was thoroughly evaluate our office. It was outdated, with old wide beige Venetian blinds and a cardboard clock on the glass front door, complete with movable arms to indicate our return time, straight out of the 60s. I believed that making a positive first impression was crucial. The landscaping leading up to the front door was old-fashioned, featuring a large patch of bark dust divided by a cracked cement path and a pressure-treated porch with an outdated wooden railing. The two bright brass-plated colonial lights flanking the door were poorly aligned. The overall appearance seemed cheap and outdated. Updating this first impression was my top priority. I reached out to several landscape architects to review the project, share their insights, and provide a bid for their design. To my surprise, the second of the three representatives was Anna Dubois, Mia's high school friend. I was taken aback at first. The negative experiences with Mia flashed through my mind, and I felt uneasy. I could sense my face flush as we met. "Max, oh my God," she exclaimed. "Is it really you?" Her tone seemed genuinely warm. She bypassed my outstretched hand and gave me a friendly hug, which helped me relax. I recalled the kindness Anna had shown me when we were teenagers. "How are you?" she asked. "You look great. So is this your business?" She bombarded me with questions. We spent a few minutes catching up. She had completed her architecture degree and was now pursuing a master's in landscape architecture. She lived in town and worked full-time as a designer at GL2 Architecture. I briefly mentioned my job, but quickly shifted the conversation to our office and my ideas for the front entry. Anna seemed a bit surprised by my abrupt transition to business. She asked a few questions, made some notes, and said she would have some preliminary designs ready by Friday. "It was so good to see you, Max," she said with a big smile. "I'll call you towards the end of the week." After another quick hug, she left. Anna appeared even better than she did in high school, still as beautiful as I remembered. I reminded myself to be cautious. Though the memory of my experience with Mia wasn't fresh, it was still vivid. The first architect came in with a huge estimate, so I dismissed them. The third architect rescheduled our meeting. I was hoping Anna had a plan that would fit our budget. On Thursday afternoon, she called. "I have a couple of ideas for your entry," Anna said. "Great," I replied. "I'm looking forward to seeing them." "Would you like to meet for lunch tomorrow?" she asked. "We could meet at the Bluebird anytime that works for you." I hesitated. It was a business meeting, but it felt a bit like a date. Not that I don't date, I do occasionally, but her connection with Mia seemed too close. I think she sensed my hesitation and quickly added, "Or I could come by your office if you'd prefer." "No," I said. "Lunch tomorrow is fine. How about 12:30? She agreed to the time, and we scheduled the lunch meeting. That night, I was feeling a mix of emotions. I was still angry at Mia, and for some reason, that anger seemed to transfer to Anna in my mind. I hoped her designs would be acceptable and within our budget. And, I had to admit, Anna was attractive, and I enjoyed her company. Alarm bells started going off. When we met at the Bluebird Bistro, she looked even better than before. She must have put extra effort into her appearance. I'm sure that helped GL2 secure business. Once again, we exchanged a warm hug as a greeting. We skipped the small talk and dove straight into discussing her designs. The first concept was quite good and fairly straightforward. The second design had an Asian theme, which I absolutely loved. However, the cost was an issue. The first design came in slightly under budget, but the Asian-themed one was $10,000 over our maximum limit. I told her I would need some time to think it over. Just then, our food arrived, and we shifted to more casual conversation. She asked where I lived, and I shared the story of Aunt Helen and my inheritance. She seemed genuinely interested in my living situation and was familiar with the land. Later, she inquired about my weekend plans. My weekends usually involve working on either the house or the yard, depending on the weather, I explained. When it's nice, like this weekend, I spend most of Saturday and Sunday outdoors. "I love gardens and plants," she said. "It must be wonderful to have all that space." "I've had many ways of describing working on my property," I responded. "But fun is never one of them," I added with a laugh. "Well, I'd love to see it," she said. "Maybe I'll surprise you one day and drop by." The next day, Saturday, as I mentioned to Anna, I spent the day working in the yard. There was so much to do. Aunt Helen had designed the land with a formal English garden style, sculpted hedges, rose gardens, and carefully planned plantings. I wasn't sure what I wanted, but Aunt Helen's style seemed a bit outdated for me. Around mid-afternoon, I noticed dust rising up the driveway, signaling a visitor. Since my parents were out of town, I figured it might be them, but to my surprise, it was Anna. I quickly assessed my appearance, unshaven, dirty, sweaty, and shirtless. I greeted her and immediately went to grab my shirt. "You didn't have to put that on for me," she said. "I was actually admiring the view," she added with a laugh. I watched her, trying to understand her intentions. My initial thought was that she was clearly putting in a lot of effort to secure the landscaping contract. I set that thought aside and gave her a thorough tour of the property. She seemed genuinely interested. I highlighted the tasks I needed to tackle, and she offered some suggestions that seemed quite reasonable. "What were you working on?" she asked. I explained, and without missing a beat, she jumped in to assist with my current task. I appreciated her help, but I couldn't help but question her motives. It seemed like she was going above and beyond just to win the contract. We worked together for several hours, and it was a comfortable experience. I had to admit, I enjoyed her company. As the day drew to a close, she mentioned she should probably head out, but lingered, almost as if she was waiting for an invitation from me. I thanked her profusely, showed her to the bathroom to freshen up, and she left somewhat reluctantly. That night, my thoughts were occupied with Anna. She was attractive and kind, but she used to be friends with Mia, which made me cautious. During the week, we discussed the landscaping proposal. I told her we preferred the Asian theme design, though it was over budget, and hinted at other bids, which we didn't actually have. By the end of the week, she returned with slight modifications to the original design and a new cost, just $2,000 over budget. We reached an agreement, and she said they could start in 3 weeks. "We need to celebrate," she suggested. I laughed lightly and said, "Ha ha ha, have a nice weekend." She seemed a bit disappointed that I didn't take up the idea of celebrating. Another warm weekend arrived, and I was working on my property. Once again, Anna showed up on Saturday afternoon, this time with a picnic basket. "Could you bring this into the house?" she asked, handing me the basket. "Now, what are we working on?" I told her, and she got to work. At the end of the day, she asked me to bring out the picnic basket and a corkscrew. She spread a tablecloth on the ground and had prepared a small feast with a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir. We had a pleasant evening, and I really enjoyed talking with her. It felt like we had a lot in common. However, since we had already signed our contract with her firm, GL2, I began to wonder if there was any point in continuing to be friendly, if that was the only goal. Over the next few weeks, we continued these casual meetups. Either she would come by the office for updates on our design project, or she'd drop by on weekends to help around my house. Our friendship deepened. So far, though, there had been nothing romantic. She hadn't made any advances, and while I was tempted to, I couldn't shake the lingering caution from Mia's betrayal, warning me about the potential for getting hurt. One Friday night, after leaving the office around 6, I went home for my usual 5-mile run. While I was considering dinner, my cell phone rang. It was Anna. "Hey, Anna," I answered. I could hear loud talking and music in the background. When there was no immediate response, I said, "Hello? Do you have a girlfriend?" Anna's voice was slightly slurred. "Huh," I responded, somewhat bewildered. Then I heard some rustling and another voice came on the line. "Hi, Max. I'm Lindsay, a friend of Anna's," she said. "She's had a bit too much to drink and was talking about driving out to see you, but she shouldn't be driving. Can you come to Palantino's and pick her up?" she asked. I agreed to help. I quickly tidied up and headed downtown. Palantino's is a nice restaurant and bar, more of a date night spot than a place for casual pickups. I found them and met Lindsay, who was quite attractive, but in my eyes, Anna was a goddess with no comparison. Anna was slightly drunk and apologized for the call. I ordered a beer, and Lindsay soon left, leaving just Anna and me. After only a few minutes at Palantino's, she asked me, "Can we go to your house?" I agreed, and we left. When we arrived, I quickly assessed the state of my house. I knew it still had the look of a place belonging to an older single woman. I hadn't done much to the interior yet, as I'd been focusing on the outside. Anna didn't seem to mind. I wasn't sure where the conversation was headed. Slightly tipsy, Anna asked if I liked her, and I said that I did. She then asked if I had a girlfriend, and I told her I didn't. "I don't want to sound conceited," she said, "but guys usually find me attractive. It doesn't seem like you do." I assured her that she was indeed very attractive. She then asked why I hadn't asked her out. I took a deep breath and shared my insecurities related to my high school relationship with Mia. We talked a bit about that, and then she mentioned Tanner. "I know he's a friend of yours, and he can be fun," she said, "but he can also be kind of a jerk. I've learned to stay away from egocentric types. I'm much better off with a different kind of man." She looked directly into my eyes as she said this. There was a moment of silence while she continued to look at me, and my mind raced. This seemed like a good sign. I hoped. Then she excused herself to use the restroom. I sat there with my thoughts, wondering what the right next step would be. I shouldn't have bothered. The next step became quite obvious when she returned. She was without outerwear, and she was beautiful. I remember looking through magazines as a teenager and imagining myself next to a beautiful woman. I remember the first time I saw Anna, how beautiful she was, and what a gorgeous body she had. And so, years later, as if from my fantasies, she was here. Like opposing magnets, I was unconsciously drawn to her. We hugged, kissed, and touched each other gently. Holding hands, we quietly went into my bedroom and lay down next to each other. We've become close. We entered a new phase of our relationship when our intimacy extended to other aspects of our bond. I was a little wary at first. My breakup with Mia as a teenager left an indelible mark, but we discussed it openly. Anna knew about this, and her close relationship with Mia at that time gave her additional information. At times I felt insecure, wondering why such a beautiful, attractive, and kind woman chose me. One evening, when I was alone, I carefully examined myself in the mirror. At 6 feet tall, in good physical shape after training, and with thick hair, I looked average, maybe a little plain. Anna made a conscious effort to calm me down. Although I still had moments of doubt, they were becoming less frequent. We got along great. We had similar goals and aspirations in life. Nevertheless, there was still a part of me that was determined that tragedy would eventually happen. I tried my best to put these thoughts aside, but it wasn't always easy. Everything was fantastic in bed. Although I didn't have many girlfriends in my youth, that didn't mean I was inexperienced. I've had a lot of meetings. I always satisfied Anna, and she was everything I wanted. I felt that my life was moving in a positive direction in many ways. My business was booming, and I was working to transform it while maintaining the successful elements laid down by my father. My house was undergoing a transformation. Anna loved working on it, particularly enjoying the gardening, planting, landscaping, and designing of the outdoor areas. More than once, she pleaded with me never to sell this special and unique piece of land she was working on. Our relationship with Anna was wonderful. The little insecurities I once had faded into occasional whispers. Anna continued to reassure me of her love, and our intimacy was exceptional. However, there was one thing I had been postponing that I knew I needed to address. I needed to call Tanner. I had to inform him about my relationship with Anna. Even though it had been nearly 9 years since they had been together, there was an unspoken male code that seemed to require this step. I was dating his ex-girlfriend, and as far as I knew, there was no expiration date on such matters. I had to reach out to him. Tanner was living in Texas, working for a large residential developer near Houston. From our occasional conversations, it seemed things were going well for him. He mentioned that he liked Texas but wouldn't mind returning to the Pacific Northwest someday. I made the call, and after a few minutes, I brought up the reason for my call. "Tanner," I began, "I wanted to talk to you about something." There was a pause, and he remained silent. "Well, I wanted to let you know that I'm in a relationship with Anna," I said. "Dubois?" he exclaimed after a brief pause, his tone full of surprise. Yes, the Anna from St. Cecilia's, I confirmed. At first, there was silence on the line. Then I heard Tanner start to chuckle. Well, congratulations, he said. She's a great girl. I'm really proud of you. I know you were a bit hesitant about relationships for a while, he added. We chatted for a few more minutes, and his easy acceptance of my relationship with Anna eased any worries I had. As we finished the call, he said, I'll have to come up and visit you all sometime soon. Y'all? It seemed like Texas was starting to grow on Tanner. Months went by, and it felt like our relationship continued to strengthen. Anna had taken over the garden and landscaping at my house, and we worked together to transform the place. We made a great team. I had been contemplating proposing, and the conversation with Tanner felt like a hurdle had been cleared. With that settled, did I have any doubts? My trust issues had essentially vanished. Anna's reassurance about her feelings had extinguished any remaining insecurities I had. I began searching for a ring. Working in insurance means meeting a lot of people and needing to sell yourself to them. It was always a pleasure when I genuinely liked the person I was working with. One of my new friend clients was Greg Boston, a man a bit older than me. I first met Greg when I was his customer. He even built a work shed for me on my property. After finishing up one day, we shared a beer and talked. I told him about my business, and he eventually became a client and, more importantly, a good friend. Greg was moving from small home remodeling jobs to home building. In our area, having access to buildable land was crucial for success. Greg would often ask, in a friendly manner, if I ever wanted to sell. I would always decline politely. Eventually, I did propose, and a thrilled Anna said yes. Now we needed to plan the wedding, which Anna and her mom mostly handled. Since I had become such good friends with Greg, I asked him to be my groomsman. Tanner was to be my best man. One day, while Anna and I were in the shed that Greg had built during wedding planning, she turned to me with a serious look. Max, there's something I need to discuss with you, she said. I felt a pang of worry and nodded silently. It's about the guest list. And Mia, she continued. A wave of relief washed over me, thinking it wasn't anything too serious. I have to invite Mia and her husband, she explained. I've known Mia for nearly my entire life. She won't be a bridesmaid or anything, just a guest, she said, her gaze steady. I considered this for a moment. I knew Anna was still on friendly terms with Mia, although their relationship had cooled, partly because Anna was aware of my dislike for Mia. I also knew Mia had married that unpleasant Michael Ameche. I had noticed another pattern. When Anna didn't want to answer a question, she would often respond with one of her own. I first suspected this when she was out with friends one night. When she returned, I asked who she'd been with. Why do you want to know? She asked in return. I guessed that Mia might have been among her friends. I let it slide, recognizing that Anna was trying to protect me, but it was a trait of hers that I kept in mind. I was silent for a while and said, Of course, she's an old friend of yours. I understand that she has come. I did the right thing. Thank you, she said, and kissed me hard. I hugged her back, and then she started walking away to the sink to continue what she was working on. I followed her. I started doing back massages while she was working on the sink. Max, what are you doing? She exclaimed with indecisive protest when I began to get very impudent. As a result, we became close right there. These days, weddings are accompanied by a constant stream of essential goods, cake decorations, veils, ribbons, etc., mostly from Amazon. While we were having fun in the barn, another batch arrived. I noticed a truck with a distinctive logo pulling up to our driveway. I didn't stop. The driver had no idea what was going on in the garden shed at that moment. But then he parked. He rummaged in the truck, grabbed the package, and headed for our porch. Only then did he see Anna. He froze, looked away for a moment, and then couldn't help but stare at her. I don't blame him. She was just great. Soon after, Anna noticed everything. She quickly covered herself, pulled away, and disappeared from sight. A minute later, we heard a truck pulling away. "Max, the courier saw us," she exclaimed. "Didn't you see him?" she asked. "Well, sort of," I replied. "Why didn't you stop?" she asked logically. "I think for 2 reasons," I said. She looked at me, puzzled. "First of all, I really liked what I was doing, and you seemed to like it too," I told her. "Secondly, I was thinking about the driver." "The driver?" she exclaimed. "Yeah. I thought that he must have such a boring job, and I thought that if I were him, I would be pleasantly surprised to see what he saw," I said. "And he seemed to like it." "I see," Anna replied. "Well, I hope you enjoyed everything today too." Then she went back into the house. The wedding was absolutely fantastic. We held it on our own property, and the gardens and grounds looked spectacular. Anna had done an excellent job with the landscaping and was proud of her work. The wedding was the perfect opportunity for her to showcase her transformation of the space. Several guests stood out. First was Tanner, my high school buddy and Anna's former boyfriend. Tanner's charismatic nature quickly eased any awkwardness from their past relationship. Despite wearing a tuxedo, Tanner's Texas roots were unmistakable. He paired his tux with a Stetson hat and shiny black cowboy boots. I lost count of how many times he said "y'all," but he pulled off the look effortlessly. I had forgotten just how much fun Tanner could be. He also brought a date, a stunning blonde with a touch of a European accent named Greta Saint. Kits. She was breathtaking. Although I thought Anna was beautiful, I must admit that next to Greta she looked a bit plain. Eventually I knew I had to greet Mia and Michael. I had been avoiding any interaction and discussions about them since high school. "Congratulations, pal," Ameshe said, extending his hand. "Thank you, Michael," I replied, shaking his hand. Mia approached me as if to offer a hug, but I quickly reached out my hand for a handshake. She hesitated for a moment before taking my hand. "You look lovely, Mia," I greeted her. She looked at me, a mix of embarrassment and doubt about my sincerity. She seemed about to speak, glanced around, and then remained silent. "What kind of business are you in?" Amesh asked me. I briefly explained my work in insurance, then felt it was only fair to ask him about his profession. That turned out to be a mistake. Amesh spent almost 15 minutes discussing his job and his success. He worked in property management for a company I recognized, Winegrass Properties. I remembered his connection with Jordan Winegrass from high school. The company had a questionable reputation for using, at best, unethical practices to acquire properties. Michael didn't mention any of that. Jordan's father, Sidney, owned the company. "Stop by sometime," Amesh suggested, handing me his business card. "Maybe you can help us save on insurance." I nodded, fully aware that I had no intention of dealing with Amesh or the Winegrass family. Another guest worth mentioning was Yasmin Reynosa, our receptionist at the insurance office. She was fantastic, hard-working, had a slight accent, and stood just over 5 feet tall. She had been with us for almost 2 years and had become indispensable to the company. I had never met Yasmin's husband before. I had only seen him a few times when he picked her up from work and waved. Yasmin introduced me to him as Angel. From his appearance alone, I might have guessed that Angel Reynosa could be involved in a gang. His arms and neck were covered in tattoos, and he had a tough demeanor. Despite this, our conversation was very courteous. "Where are you going for your honeymoon?" Angel asked. I told him we were heading to Hawaii. He seemed genuinely interested and asked for more details about the trip. I shared some information about our plans. As we chatted, Angel wrapped his arm around the petite Yasmin. "Someday, baby," he said to Yasmin, "I'll take you there." His sincerity was touching. The rest of the wedding was wonderful. We had a great time, and the guests appeared to enjoy themselves. As I mentioned to the Reynosa family, Our honeymoon in Hawaii was fantastic. Afterwards, life returned to normal, though now I was married. Our married life was wonderful. Both of us worked full-time and had a plan for the house and grounds. Anna seemed even more eager than I was to tackle the work needed to renovate Aunt Helen's old house. After the wedding, the photographer we hired asked if he could return to take some pictures of the property. He was impressed and mentioned that they were preparing a photo article for the Sunday paper and were looking for unique landscapes. Anna was thrilled about this opportunity, as it also meant free publicity for her landscape architecture firm, GL2. She spent every spare moment before the photo shoot working on the gardens. When the Sunday paper featured the photo shoot, Anna appeared in 2 of the images. Her photogenic beauty likely contributed to her prominence in the photos. She was also quoted several times in the newspaper article and seemed naturally adept at handling media attention. Another significant event in our lives occurred roughly a year after our wedding. Tanner returned. He recounted his successful stint in Texas working for a major firm and expressed his ambition to leverage that experience to establish his own company in the Pacific Northwest, which he named Texas Pacific. Tanner leased a prestigious office space in the downtown area, hired an attractive receptionist, and furnished the office with high-end decor. He once mentioned that projecting success was essential for achieving it. While I somewhat agreed, Tanner's approach was bordering on the extravagant. Tanner became a part of Anna's and my lives. He was single, as his glamorous relationship with Greta St. Kitts had ended. Although I experienced moments of jealousy, I generally felt comfortable with Tanner being included in our lives. I also became Tanner's insurance agent, covering both his personal property and business. Tanner proved to be a high-maintenance client, frequently needing reminders about premium payments. More than once, I had to visit his office to collect a check to ensure his insurance remained active. Although managing this was beyond my usual responsibilities, I did it for Tanner, understanding the risk of coverage lapses from missed payments. One evening, as Anna, Tanner, and I relaxed at home with wine and discussed our professional and personal aspirations, I shared my thoughts. I love helping people make the right financial decisions. I don't expect to get rich, but I find joy in what I do and in seeing those I've helped succeed. I'm content with a peaceful and fulfilling life. After a minute, Anna said, "I want to start my own landscape design company one day. I want to be recognized in the community, to have designs that people showcase and discuss. I guess I want to be somewhat famous." She laughed a little as she said this, but I could tell she was serious. A few minutes later, Tanner spoke. "I'm a bit different from both of you," he said in a surprisingly earnest tone. "I want to make enough money so that I don't have to do anything I don't want to. I want a big win. I want to be able to walk away from my business at any time without it affecting my lifestyle. That's my goal." I watched Tanner in silence, and although we were good friends, I realized just how different our aspirations were. Months turned into years, and I often reflected on that spontaneous conversation about goals Tanner, Anna, and I had one June evening. Although my aspirations might not have been as lofty, I felt I was making progress toward achieving them. The insurance agency was thriving. My dad worked 20 to 30 hours a week, arriving around 9 in the morning with the newspaper. I continued to attract new clients and was always brainstorming ways to expand the business. Anna was also pursuing her goals. Less than a year ago, she left GL2 to start her own venture. Thanks to some extra effort from my friend Greg Boston, the shed, where I had once embarrassed Anna in front of the delivery man, was now a fully operational office. I still like to tease her about that incident and have even recreated it a few times. The shed is now surrounded by the garden designs Anna has created across my property. It has become a fantastic venue to showcase her landscaping skills, and she has secured several contracts for our backyard as clients toured the grounds. As for Tanner, he seemed to be doing reasonably well. He was always busy with projects or developments. From my business interactions with him, I knew that his cash flow was sometimes quite tight. I frequently had to remind him about upcoming premium payments. I wouldn't call him disorganized, just heavily leveraged, but I understood his goal. He was aiming for a major deal. One evening in mid-May, he gave me a call and suggested we get together for drinks, mentioning he had something he wanted to discuss. "Let's meet at Evergreen around 6 tonight," he said. Evergreen was a trendy bar and restaurant popular with the younger crowd. It wasn't my first choice, but it would do. "Hey, Max, how's it going?" He greeted me with a hug, and then we took a seat. I knew Tanner well enough to recognize that he was in his assertive salesman mode. I could tell he wanted something, but I wasn't sure what it was yet. "I might have a once-in-a-lifetime deal here," he began, rubbing his hands together. "It's a bit complicated, but it's guaranteed to be profitable. I wanted to give you the chance to get involved, Max." Although I was sure Tanner valued me as a friend, I knew well enough from our time together that his interest in this deal wasn't purely about friendship. He needed something from me. Tanner explained that he had an option on a prime piece of land on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. The widow of one of the firm's partners in Texas owned the property and was considering selling it. Tanner had become friendly with her and had always told her to approach him first if she decided to sell. It seemed he had charmed the elderly widow. Now she was offering the land to Tanner. "She's asking for $1 million for the property," he said excitedly. "It's worth at least 2 or 3 times that. It's on a gorgeous sandy beach. Once we build something on it, we could sell the beachfront home for no less than $5 million, he explained. He pulled out a folder and showed me photos of the land, which was covered with scrub vegetation and palm trees, with the sparkling blue-green sea in the background. I could definitely see the potential in this property. "I can borrow against a few things and put together $500,000 with my existing cash," Tanner said. "If you invest $500,000, we could buy the property 50-50. I'll create some high-end real estate marketing materials. We sell the beachfront estate, and your money will at least double within a year, 18 months at most." He was closely observing my reaction, his excitement seeming almost infectious. I took a moment to think as he continued to add convincing comments about his proposal. "Tanner," I said, "you've really surprised me. The property is indeed impressive, but $500,000 is a significant amount. I don't have that kind of money readily available and would need a substantial collateralized loan." Throughout my response, he kept nodding eagerly, trying to share his enthusiasm with me. He continued to elaborate on the deal, the property, and the potential profit. Eventually, I told him I needed to discuss it with Anna and think it over. The rest of the evening, Tanner remained enthusiastic and fully in sales mode. "Max," he said excitedly, "you're my best friend, and we've known each other for a long time. I genuinely believe this will be great for us." I promised to get back to him the next day, but the more he tried to persuade me, the more cautious I became about entering into a partnership with him. Later that night, I shared Tanner's proposal with Anna. She seemed quite interested, perhaps even more so than I was. My own excitement waned as I thought it over more deeply. I decided to sleep on it. By mid-morning, I concluded that I would decline the investment offer for several reasons. Primarily, my investment approach is quite conservative, and I was also concerned that any potential issues could damage my long-term friendship with Tanner. I texted Tanner to see if he was available for lunch, and he agreed. When I told him I was not going to invest, I knew he would be disappointed, but I wasn't prepared for his intense reaction. He became angry. "This is a sure thing," he said. "How can you turn down $500,000 in profit?" The friendliness was gone, replaced by questioning of my intelligence and judgment. Finally, he played his last card. He questioned our friendship. When I tried to express my concerns about how this deal might impact our friendship, he dismissed my concerns. The more passionate he became about my refusal to participate, the more convinced I was that I had made the right choice. "Tanner," I said to him, "if this deal is as solid as you claim, surely there will be plenty of others eager to join in." He just stared at me and I could see that my words had upset him, though I wasn't sure why. "Even Anna thinks this is a good opportunity," he said. "Anna?" I asked. "You spoke to Anna about this?" I was surprised he had discussed such matters with her. A feeling I thought I had long overcome surfaced. Jealousy. He tried to explain that he was seeking her input on the property's landscaping. Interesting, I thought. I'd need to hear Anna's perspective on this. As we parted ways, the mood was far from the warm enthusiasm of the previous evening. A subtle distance had opened up between us, and I was curious to see how things would unfold. Weeks went by. Anna informed me that she had discussed the property with Tanner, who had inquired about tropical landscaping. She was eager to share her ideas with him, mentioning that she had never worked on a tropical design before and was keen to do so. She believed the land investment could be a good opportunity, though she understood why I had declined. Gradually, my friendship with Tanner improved, and we ended up doing business together, which required us to communicate. I never asked him about the project, but it seemed he was moving forward with it in some capacity. One day, I visited his office to pick up a nearly overdue premium check and noticed a glossy brochure featuring a stunning tropical home. It was clearly located on the beautiful beachfront lot in Kauai. As I was looking it over, Tanner emerged from his office and mentioned he might have a potential buyer for the proposed home. He revealed that he had personally arranged the funds, secured a loan, and purchased the Kauai land. He was nearing completion on a large cedar custom home in wine country and planned to temporarily relocate to Kauai in about a month to start on the estate. I asked about the sale of the Kauai estate. "It will sell for $5.5 million, he said. "Wow, $5.5 million, I responded, surprised. "Who's the buyer?" I inquired. "Actually, a local guy," Tanner replied. "Do you know Sidney Winegrass?" I was familiar with Sidney Winegrass. That unpleasant Michael Amesh worked for him. He didn't have the best reputation, but I assumed he was wealthy. "Tanner," I said, "be cautious dealing with Winegrass. I've heard some not-so-great things about him and his business." "Max," Tanner assured me, "don't worry, I know Sid. We've done some business together. He's a good guy." Tanner brushed off my concerns. A few days later, Anna came in to tell me about a new client she had, Tanner. She explained that she would be designing the beachfront home he was building on Kauai. "I'm really excited about it," she said. "I've always wanted to work on a tropical project." "What will that involve for you?" I asked. "Most of it will be done from my office here," she replied. "But I was hoping that in October, when I need to be there, you and I could take a second honeymoon, and it would be a tax write-off." That actually sounded great, especially in March in the Pacific Northwest, where the rain, wind, and cold seem unending. A warm tropical vacation sounded wonderful, and I'd love to see the house. Plus, I thought it would be good for our relationship, a chance to revive it. A week later, Anna came in again with more potentially good news. One of the local TV stations, KPAL, was looking to add a weekly garden segment and wanted to discuss hosting it with her. Life seemed to be moving positively for both of us. Things were good, though I started to feel that our connection wasn't as strong as it used to be. I rationalized that it was because we were both busy. One evening, Tanner, Anna, and I went out together. Tanner was set to leave for Kauai in a few days. We talked about our plans for a second honeymoon and working vacation in October, when we'd visit Tanner's job site. Tanner briefly explained the financial aspects of buying the lot and building the house on Kauai. It was quite complex, and I struggled to follow all the details, raising concerns about its legality. It seemed like he might be mixing funds, possibly using money intended for finishing the lodge in wine country to cover some of the Kauai estate expenses. The situation seemed complicated and potentially unethical. "The way I've arranged it," Tanner said, "once we close on the Kauai property, I should end up with nearly $4 million after taxes." He smiled and leaned back in his chair. I hoped everything would work out for him, but I had my doubts. One thing I was sure of was that I had made the right choice by not partnering with him on this property deal. After leaving Tanner, while we were driving home, I shared my concerns about his risky deal. "Can't you just be happy for him?" Anna responded. "Just because he takes more risks than you would doesn't mean what he's doing is wrong." I didn't say anything. I was taken aback by her defense of Tanner. A few months later, Anna had her interview with KPAL, the local television station that was looking for a gardening personality to host a weekly segment on Fridays. The goal was to secure sponsorship from local garden centers and encourage homeowners to plan garden projects for the upcoming weekend. Anna felt both nervous and excited. Her good looks and photogenic qualities were likely to be advantageous. Additionally, she had the beautiful gardens on her property, which would provide a stunning backdrop for her gardening tips. Her shed office could also be transformed into a makeshift studio. Interestingly, this was the same building where I had once had an intimate encounter with Anna in front of the Amazon driver. For some reason, that pleasant memory always came to mind when I thought about the shed. In early September, KPAL contacted Anna with an offer to host In the Garden with Anna, starting in late November and running through the holidays, then continuing again in late winter. Anna was thrilled. Not only would she receive payment from KPAL, but it would also be great exposure for her landscape design company, Distinctive Gardens. This was all fantastic news. I did notice, however, that a lot of her recent energy seemed to be focused on her career, which was understandable. Still, I couldn't help but think that she was investing less energy into our relationship. We started discussing our trip to Kauai. Anna had been in touch with Tanner about the oceanfront project there. It seemed to be progressing, though not as smoothly as Tanner had anticipated. I wasn't sure how frequently she spoke with him, but on a few occasions when I visited her office, she was on the phone with Tanner, and their conversations seemed more social than business-related. We were set to depart on a Friday and stay for the following weekend, a total of 8 days at the Sheraton on Kauai. I was really looking forward to this break, believing we needed a nice vacation to help get our relationship back on track. My dad and Yasmin would handle things while I was away, and with Yasmin there, I felt confident everything would be in good hands. However, 2 days before our departure, disaster struck. My dad had a heart attack at home and started experiencing chest pain. My mom called me in 911, and an ambulance took him to St. Luke's. Anna and I met my mom at the hospital. My dad was conscious but in pain. We visited for a few minutes before the nurse asked us to leave. Later, we spoke with the cardiologist, who informed us that my dad would be hospitalized for a few days, followed by a period of bed rest at home. Both Anna and I understood what this meant. No Kauai trip for me. Not only did I need to support my parents, but I also needed to be present in the office during the week. Anna agreed to stay home as well, but we both recognized she needed to be on site to oversee the landscape design project. Given my preoccupation with my dad, we decided she should go and return as soon as possible. We would have to celebrate our second honeymoon at a later date. Dad was still in the hospital when I drove Anna to the airport. Distracted by worry about my dad's health, I hadn't given much thought to Anna's trip. I tried to focus on her during the drive, expressing how much I would miss her and encouraging her to find time to relax and enjoy Hawaii. We said our goodbyes with a hug and a kiss, and she quickly disappeared into the long line at airport security. I promised to call her daily and then return to my dad's bedside. On Saturday, my dad was discharged with clear instructions to rest in bed. The doctors were considering surgical options, including a bypass. Either my mom or I would be at his bedside for the next week to ensure he was recovering properly. My dad has always been an early riser, so I told my mom I would come by on Sunday at 5 a.m. to stay with him and let her sleep in a bit. She took over around 9 a.m. While driving home, I was surprised to receive a call from Tanner. He inquired about my dad and then asked me to stop by the job site in wine country, where he was finishing up the big cedar lodge. He needed something left behind by the inspector. I told him I would be with my dad that day, but could pick it up for him sometime this week. He said any time during the week would work. I also reminded him that his insurance premium was overdue. Yeah, I'll get it to you, he responded. Typical. I'll need to drop by his office to collect a check. After ending the call, I wished I were with Anna in Hawaii. It was the soft Hawaiian music playing in the background during the call that reminded me of our honeymoon there. I decided to call Anna. It took her a moment, but she answered, sounding sleepy. Good morning, she said, and then it hit me. It was early there. There's a 3-hour time difference between Hawaii and the West Coast. It was only 6 a.m. on Kauai. I forgot how early it is, sorry, I said. That's okay. How's your dad? She asked. We continued discussing my dad and her trip up to that point. I missed her deeply and envisioned the balcony doors open, letting in a warm breeze, the ocean's sound, the tropical scent in the air, and that ever-present beautiful Hawaiian music. We were in the middle of our conversation, and I had more to discuss when my mom called, and I had to hang up. I'll call you later, I said to her before switching to speak with my mom. I had lunch with my dad while my mom was out running errands. When she came back, she asked if I could handle some chores while she stayed with my dad. As I worked on the chores, my thoughts drifted to Anna in Kauai, and I wished again that I could be there. I replayed our brief conversation and the vivid Hawaiian imagery, beaches, palm trees, sunsets, and that music. The music? I started to think about it. I remembered the Hawaiian music in the background during my call with Anna and noticed the same type of music when I had spoken to Tanner. A pang of suspicion hit me. I reviewed the situation. Tanner had called me, and I heard the Hawaiian music. Shortly after, I called Anna, and it was still early morning in Hawaii. It sounded like she had just woken up, and the same Hawaiian music was playing. Were they together? If so, what could they be doing together at 6 in the morning on a Sunday? Was I being paranoid? Maybe Tanner was simply staying at the same hotel as Anna, and the music was just a coincidence. For a moment, that seemed plausible, and I relaxed. But upon further thought, Tanner wouldn't be staying at the 300+ per night Sheraton for months while working on the beach house. He must have arranged more affordable accommodations. Had Tanner spent the night with Anna? I decided to call Anna. I told her my dad was improving, and we chatted about general topics. I then decided to ask a few questions about her project and some general matters. So, have you had a chance to hang out with Tanner after work? I asked casually. She hesitated. Why do you ask? She responded. Uh-oh. I knew when she was reluctant to answer a question, she'd deflect with another question. Oh, nothing, I said, keeping my tone light. Just curious. I've only seen him at the job site, she said. That's about it. I kept the conversation light, but red flags were going off. I didn't have concrete proof, but I had enough clues to fuel my suspicions. Later, I called Tanner, pretending to remind him about the overdue premium. Yeah, I know, he said. I'll have Bernadette handle it in the morning. We kept the conversation casual, just general talk. I thanked him for looking after Anna while she was on her own. No problem, he replied. Can't let my buddy's beautiful wife be alone at night. We talked a bit more, and then I ended the call. Something felt off. Anna said she was only seeing Tanner at the job site, but Tanner mentioned escorting her in the evenings. The stories didn't add up. I didn't have specific evidence, just a collection of clues. I started to devise a plan. I made a call and scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. On Monday morning at the office, I met with Yasmin and Angel Reynosa. I requested their absolute confidentiality, and they agreed. I shared my concerns about Anna and Tanner, and they listened without asking any questions. I then asked if they could travel to Kauai for an unofficial investigation, providing them with a folder containing pictures of Tanner and Anna for identification. "When should we start, Mr. Max?" Angel asked. "Tomorrow," I replied. "I'd like you to stay until next Sunday. You'll be at the same hotel as Anna. Just keep an eye on her. If nothing unusual happens, you can enjoy the week." Both Angel and Yasmin agreed right away. I told Yasmin I would handle all the arrangements and gave them $1,000 for expenses beyond lodging and airfare. I also mentioned I'd drive them to the airport in the morning, stressing that they should keep the purpose of their trip confidential. They agreed. As they were leaving, Angel stopped me and said, "Mr. Max, thank you. If you ever need a favor, just ask Angel." He looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and left. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I thought it was worth the expense to get reassurance from the Renosas that Anna and Tanner were not involved in whatever my jealous imagination had concocted. I continued to call Anna daily and never sensed anything unusual from her. I was starting to feel a bit foolish about my paranoia and the decision to send the Renosas to investigate. On Thursday afternoon, I decided to visit Tanner's nearly completed project in the wine country. He had asked me to pick up a document from the county. Just as I arrived at the house, Yasmin called me. I had instructed them not to call unless there was something significant to report. I expected her to confirm everything was fine, but that wasn't the case. "Max," she said, "Angel took some photos you need to see." I asked her to describe them, but she insisted, "You need to look at the pictures." I heard message notifications coming through on my phone. I told her I'd call back. There were 4 photos. In the first photo, they were walking with their arms around each other at sunset on the path in front of the Sheraton. It was bad, but not terrible. The second photo showed them kissing at a table in a dark restaurant. It was getting worse. The third photo depicted them on a balcony at the Sheraton, kissing again, with his hand seemingly on her breast. It was pretty bad. Finally, the last one, which was blurry, appeared to be from the same room as the previous photo, showing 2 neck-deep people behind sheer white curtains. This was really bad. I sat on a 5-gallon bucket in the garage, feeling utterly devastated. My wife and my best friend, how could this be happening again after everything I went through years ago with Mia? But this was even worse. Much worse. I wasn't sure how long I sat there. Over an hour, lost in thoughts about my life falling apart. I didn't know what to do. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive him? The answers were a definitive no and an emphatic hell no. Then 2 things began to happen. 1, a burning anger started to build inside me. 2, I began to feel lightheaded from the oil-based stain applied to the cedar siding. I noticed a pile of oily rags in the corner of the garage and remembered from an insurance class that they could cause spontaneous combustion. I started to move them, but then suddenly stopped. I carefully put on a pair of lightweight gloves and gathered all the rags into a metal bucket, piling them together. I added a bit more of the oil-based stain to the bucket and positioned a bundle of No. 1 cedar shingles close by. Then, I turned on a space heater near the bucket of oily rags before leaving. I picked up the document Tanner wanted and drove off. Out here in the wine country, there were no neighbors around. Besides, I had a reason for being there. If a fire were to start, how could it be traced back to me? I remembered the explanation about spontaneous combustion. It happens when oily rags or cloth are gradually heated through oxidation to their ignition point. As the substance oxidizes, it releases heat. If this heat can't escape, like when the rags are piled up, the temperature can rise high enough to ignite the oil and the rags themselves. This fire can quickly spread to other combustibles and cause significant damage. I texted Tanner to let him know I had the document and later received a Tayan X in reply. I also thought about Tanner's insurance, which had recently lapsed. Despite my attempts to remind him via text and email earlier in the week, I wasn't going to visit to renew it. Technically, he had no fire insurance at the moment. My thoughts turned to Anna. I couldn't forgive her. She had no idea of the pain she caused me, and I wished she could feel the same hurt. After a few minutes, an idea started forming, so I called my builder friend, Greg Boston. We arranged to meet that evening, and I stressed the importance and urgency of the matter. We met at a small restaurant. When he looked at me, he could immediately tell something was off. He asked what was wrong, but I dismissed him. "Greg, you've asked me about my land several times," I said, and he nodded. "I want to sell it, but there are a few conditions," I explained. "The most crucial one is that I need the house and gardens cleared and demolished within the next 3 days." He nearly choked at the deadline. "3 days!" he exclaimed. "That's impossible." I told him if he couldn't manage it, I'd find someone else who could. "Hold on, Max. Let me think," he said. After a moment, he believed he could meet the deadline, though it would be tight. We negotiated a price and one more major condition. We reached a gentleman's agreement, shook hands, and he promised to start the next day. "Max, as a friend, I have to ask, what's going on?" he asked. "Greg," I replied, "we'll have that discussion someday, but today is not that day." He nodded, and we parted ways. That night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Tanner. I didn't answer. When I woke up, I had urgent voicemails from Tanner asking me to call him. I took my time, turned on the morning news, and saw a report about a 4-alarm fire in Yamhill County, wine country. Fortunately, there were no injuries as the house was vacant, but it was a total loss. I called Tanner on my way in, and he answered frantically. "Max, the house we were finishing burned down," he said. "I need that cash. When can we settle?" "Hold on," I replied. "What house?" I was getting quite adept at playing dumb. He went on about the house, his cash flow issues, and the house he was building for Winegrass in Kauai. He was panicked, jumping from one topic to another. I wasn't sure I could help him even if I wanted to, and honestly, I didn't want to. "Tanner," I said calmly, "let me get into the office and review everything. We can discuss it later. Did you ask Bernadette to send the check for the premium?" "What?" he stammered. "Didn't you get it? I think I asked her. Is it important?" He continued. I told him I would look into it and ended the call. He was still talking as I hung up. I had no intention of following up. Our friendship was over. Now I had to deal with Anna. For the next few days, I kept calling Anna and tried to act as normally as possible. I think she could tell something was off, but she didn't say anything. I did receive a few more photos from Angel Reynosa, which only confirmed what I had already seen. Anna and Tanner were involved. Tanner kept calling, and each voicemail seemed more urgent than the last. Anna was scheduled to return home on Monday, which was just the day after tomorrow. I hadn't told my parents anything yet. My dad didn't need any additional stress, and I wanted my mom to focus on him. Greg Boston had brought in a bunch of heavy machinery, graders, backhoes, tractors, to prepare the land for development. I had a couple of pods delivered and packed all of Anna's personal and business items into one, while my own belongings went into the other. It felt odd to drive up to my property now. The skyline was completely changed, with no house or gardens in sight. Anna's flight was expected to arrive around 6 p.m. that Monday. When I picked her up and hugged her, she tried to kiss me on the lips, but I turned, and her kiss landed on my cheek instead. She gave me a puzzled look, which I chose to ignore, and instead asked her how the flight was. On the way home, she sensed something was off. We briefly discussed the fire, but I quickly changed the topic. I was decent at acting, but I couldn't completely hide my betrayal. I suggested we stop at a small bar on the way. "Max, I've been traveling for 6 hours. I just want to get home," she said. "This will only take a minute," I replied, and pulled into the bar. After we were seated and had a drink, she looked at me, puzzled. "What's so important that we had to stop?" she asked. I handed her the folder with pictures Angel had sent me, which I had printed. As she opened them, she gasped, glancing between the photos and me. "Max, Max, this isn't what it looks like, she started. I hung out with Tanner a bit, but nothing really happened. She pleaded, "You've got to believe me." I had kept one photo back. It showed Anna nude on her balcony at night, with Tanner behind her, holding her betrayal. I placed it in front of her. "Nothing really happened?" I asked. She began to sob, apologizing profusely. She explained how things had gotten out of hand. Tanner had been aggressive and persuasive, making her feel young again. She promised it wouldn't happen again. It was just intimacy. I was waiting for that last part. "Anna," I said with a controlled, simmering anger, "I'm not sure you realize how deeply you've hurt me. I hope that someday, maybe soon, you experience this kind of pain yourself." "Max, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "Can we just go home and try to work things out?" she pleaded. "Yes," I replied. "It's time to go home." And we left. The rest of the drive was silent. Anna continued to cry and beg for forgiveness, but I remained quiet, contemplating when she would understand that things had changed. It didn't take long. "Max," she asked as we approached, What is happening?" She saw the heavy machinery and the flattened house. She gazed into the twilight in disbelief. I remained silent, waiting for her reaction. "Max! Max!" Her head swung between the altered scene and me. "Where is everything? The house? My office? My gardens?" Her voice was rising in panic. "I decided to develop the property. I received a good offer for the land," I told her calmly. "They're going to build 28 houses. I got a really good price. I think it will work out fine," I added with feigned enthusiasm. "You sold our home? What about my gardens? My business?" She was growing frantic. Then it dawned on her. "What about my TV show?" she wailed. I shrugged, palms up in an "oh well" gesture. Anna wandered through what had once been her gardens. Fragments of the shrubs and flowers she had carefully planted were scattered among the churned earth where the heavy machinery had dug it up. For several minutes, she stood there taking in the altered landscape. "Did you do this to hurt me?" she demanded. "Is this my punishment?" She screamed at me. I remained silent. "Answer me! Answer me, you idiot!" she yelled. Then she sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Maybe she was beginning to feel some of the pain I had endured. I felt no sympathy. "Me hurt you?" I asked, with exaggerated disbelief. "We're married. You go off to Hawaii while I'm caring for my sick dad, and you sleep with my best friend," I said. When I found out, I knew my life had changed. Permanently. So I decided to make some changes, too. "Your belongings are in this pod," I said, pointing to the nearest one. "And here are your car keys," I added, handing them to her. "I need to get to my family. You might want to stay with yours." I turned and walked towards my car. "Max!" she called out. "So this is it? You destroy my garden, wreck my career plans, and now you're just leaving? Is that all our marriage means to you?" she demanded. I turned and looked at her. "Don't you dare question my commitment to our marriage," I told her. "We'll talk about things, but not tonight." And with that, I left. The next morning at the office, I filled Yasmin in on everything that had happened. She was already aware of most of it. I also let her know that Tanner would be calling and asked her to act as my gatekeeper. Yasmin confirmed that we had not received the premium check from Tanner or Texas Pacific. Their insurance had lapsed as of last Monday, 3 days before the fire at the home in wine country. Later in the morning, I was visited by the Yamhill County Fire Inspector. Somehow, probably through Tanner, he had been informed that I had been at the house on Thursday, the day of the fire. I confirmed to him that I had indeed been there, as I was retrieving documents at Tanner's request. He inquired whether I had noticed anything unusual, smelled anything odd, or seen anything out of place. I explained that I had only visited the house once before, months ago, so I didn't have much to compare it to. However, I hadn't observed anything unusual. I then asked if they had determined the cause of the fire. Nothing official yet, he replied, but it might have been spontaneous combustion. I frowned, puzzled. Spontaneous? What? I asked. He proceeded to explain the concept of spontaneous combustion. I listened, asked a few questions, and then he left. That was the last communication I had from the fire department. I asked Yasmin to handle Tanner's claim with Guarantor, the insurance company we represent for property and liability coverage. I wanted to distance myself from this claim. My frustration with Anna was only surpassed by my irritation with Tanner. Tanner kept trying to reach me on both my cell phone and our office line. I ignored the cell phone calls, and Yasmin fielded the office calls. He seemed increasingly desperate. Yasmin had started the claims process with Guarantor for Tanner, but if I understood insurance companies correctly, collecting on a claim with a payment in arrears could be challenging. After several attempts, I finally took Anna's call one afternoon. "Max," she said, "we need to talk. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I need you," she continued. I knew this meeting was unavoidable. Despite still feeling numb from her betrayal, I needed to understand it. Her actions, especially affecting Tanner during what was supposed to be our second honeymoon, were beyond unacceptable. "Okay," I agreed. "Let's meet at the Coffee Clatch in Old Town at 4 p.m., I said, hanging up as she confirmed the meeting. We met without hugs or physical contact. She continued to stare at me intently, as if trying to assess my state of mind, whether I was angry, saddened, or ready to forgive. It was clear that she wanted to assess my emotions. I decided to start a conversation. "Anna," I began, "when we first met, you knew better than anyone how broken I was by my relationship with Mia in high school." "I know, and I felt so bad that She interrupted. I raised my hand. "Anna," I said calmly, but with irritation, "let me finish. It will be your turn, but first it's important for you to hear what I'm getting at." She nodded silently, indicating that she understood. "After Mia's death," I continued, "I almost decided to live as a confirmed bachelor. I went on dates, but nothing serious. But then you came into my life. You've encouraged me. I thought you understood. I trusted you. I believed that I was healed. And now this. You cheated on me. I really would like to understand why." I told her. She talked incoherently for several minutes about how sorry she was and what a huge mistake it was. I kept my face impassive as I watched her desperately seek some kind of forgiveness. Then she told me the story. She was thrilled to go to Hawaii, even though I wasn't there. She said the sounds, sights, and smells reminded her of the wonderful time we spent on our honeymoon. She was in a good mood. Tanner met her at the small Lihu airport. On the way to Koloa, he picked her up at her place of work. She said she was surprised at how little progress had been made, but Tanner remained optimistic. They arrived at the Sheraton Hotel, and Tanner insisted on inviting her to dinner that evening. He picked her up at 7, and they went to the local restaurant, Paradise Kyoki. They were both in high spirits, and tropical drinks were flowing freely. Tanner began to remember the old days. After dinner, they walked barefoot along the beach in front of the Sheraton Hotel. Tanner went on to talk about their past relationship. Anna said she felt tipsy, happy, and telling Tanner about her school days made her feel young again. Tanner insisted on having a nightcap and asked to see her room. He slept with her that night. Anna admitted that she knew it was wrong, but believed that since I would never find out, it would be just a brief affair. She thought she could get it out of her system, and it would never be mentioned again. In her words, they continued to be intimate while she was in Kauai. "Max, please don't throw away our life over something as insignificant as intimacy. It meant nothing to me, and Tanner means nothing to me. I'll do whatever you want. Please, I beg you. Please, at least consider it," she pleaded. I agreed to think about it. The next day, I had her served with divorce papers. The truth was, After leaving Anna at the coffee klatch that night, I did think about it. But the more I thought, the angrier I became. In the end, I realized that I would never be able to fully trust her again. I couldn't live with that. She called, texted, and finally came to my office when I didn't respond. She barged in, furious that I had her served. She reminded me that I had promised to think about it. Why was I giving up on our marriage? Didn't I have any compassion? Hadn't I ever made a mistake? She went on and on. I barely said a word. Then she brought up how I had ruined her business opportunity at KPAL. Without her gardens, they were reconsidering In the Garden with Anna. The gardens were supposed to be the backdrop, and without them, the show's appeal had lessened. My silence seemed to infuriate her even more. She then told me she was entitled to half of our assets, including the house and land. Anna, that land is in a family trust. My Aunt Helen set it up that way, I explained. And besides, I was the caretaker of the property before we got together. I consulted with my lawyer. You have no claim whatsoever on the property or anything within the trust, I told her. Now, if you don't mind, I have some work to finish. With that, I tilted my computer screen towards me and resumed working. She sat there for a moment, then stood up, walked out, and slammed the door behind her. 3 days later, Tanner showed up at my office. I thought he was still in Hawaii. I heard a commotion in the front office where Yasmin sat. Before I had a chance to check, Tanner stormed into my office. "Get out," I said, pointing to the exit. "Max, just give me a minute. I know I deserve that, but I need to talk to you, not to," he said, gesturing with his thumb toward where Yasmin was now standing. I was furious, but at the same time intrigued by what he could tell me about his financial situation and his relationship with Anna. "I need you to insist on your statement," he pleaded, showing a desperation I'd never seen in Max before. "I'm in a hurry to purchase real estate in Hawaii. I need money from the sale of a country wine house to complete a beach house." He kept muttering. I thought about his words. It appears that he used the wine house as collateral when buying a plot on Kauai, and then used his deposit from Winegrass to complete the construction of the wine house. After that, he probably used the land on Kauai as collateral to get materials for building a house on the seashore, or something like that. The bottom line is that he was heavily in debt, and he owed Sydney Winegrass a beach house. "First of all," I told him, "instead of spending time in Hawaii and sleeping with my wife, you should have paid the insurance premium. Secondly, I can't control the claims. The guarantor decides whether the claim is justified, not me. I'm just an agent. Thirdly, I doubt that you will receive compensation for the claim. Your policy has been canceled due to non-payment. And finally, get out of here. I never want to see you again." "Max," he began, using all his charm. "Look, what happened to Anna is nothing. Just an affair for old time's sake. It didn't mean anything. She loves you, man. She's always talking about you." He was too categorical. I cut him off. "Get out," I shouted. Finally, he left. I thought about what he had done. I still couldn't figure out all the loans and liens, but I knew one thing. He was in serious trouble with Sydney Winegrass. Not the kind of person I'd want to argue with. The next week or two passed. Greg Boston was converting Aunt Helen's old property into what would eventually become a neighborhood. Even my father started to get better. Anna hired a lawyer, and our lawyers worked on the division of our property, gradually unraveling the financial aspects of our marriage. The emotional side, however, was like a dark cloud hanging over me. I tried to keep a positive attitude in the company of other people, but it was hard to be alone. My thoughts were dark, mostly focused on Tanner and Anna. I decided to seek counseling, and gradually, I began to notice faint glimmers of something resembling positivity in my life. One evening, a few weeks after my last encounter with Tanner, I met a couple of friends for drinks and dinner at a casual restaurant just outside of town. As I was heading to the dimly lit parking lot, I started to think that maybe my life could return to some kind of normalcy. As I approached my car, I noticed a couple of people near where I had parked. Two large men were lingering around, and there was a black Chrysler 300 with custom wheels parked nearby. As I moved to get into my car, the two guys closed in on me. "Hey, what's going on?" I said as they each grabbed one of my arms. "Hello, pal," I heard, and turned to see Michael Ameshe approaching. "Mr. Winegrass wants to have a word with you," Ameshe said. "He can make an appointment with me in the morning. I'm done for the day," I replied. I started to struggle to break free from the two thugs, but their grip tightened. As I was squirming, Ameshe walked up and backhanded me squarely across the face. For a moment, I was stunned, my lip bleeding. "Mr. Winegrass wants to see you now," he informed me. "Boys, get him in the back seat," he ordered the goons. This was unreal. I was being abducted. I was sure Winegrass was digging into his deal with Tanner and somehow thought I was involved. While I was confident I could explain my lack of involvement, this whole situation felt overwhelmingly heavy-handed. I couldn't quite shake the undercurrent of fear running through me. Our destination was an old building in the industrial section of downtown, not far from the docks. At this hour, it was deserted. There would be no concerned bystander coming to my aid. I was dragged down to a dark basement. I noticed that the egress windows were boarded up. The air was damp and musty, with water dripping down the stone walls in some areas. Soon, I noticed something else. Deep in the shadows, duct-taped to a wooden chair, sat Tanner. He looked a bit roughed up, his eyes darting around with a desperate expression, a far cry from the confident persona he usually displayed. After I was taped to a similar chair, Amesh and one of the goons left, leaving the other to silently watch over us in this grim dungeon. Amesh and the other thug soon returned. "Mr. Winegrass is running late. He'll be here shortly," Amesh informed us. "But in the meantime, pal, you and I have some unfinished business," he said, staring directly at me. "You remember how you messed up my leg?" he asked. I stayed silent. "It's payback time," he told me. With that, Michael Amesh started beating me while I was strapped to the chair, repeatedly hitting me in the face. I could tell I'd lost teeth, and my nose was probably broken. I might have blacked out. My eyes were swollen nearly shut. He seemed to take great pleasure in it. Thankfully, Amesh's phone rang. "Mr. Winegrass is on his way," he said, as he wiped my blood off his hands with a rag. The three of them went upstairs to wait. Max, Tanner whispered to me. "Winegrass wants money. We need to stick together. I might be able to come up with $500,000 to pay him back. Can you get $1 million? I think we can negotiate this, but we need to stick together. Okay, Max?" With my injuries, talking was difficult. Just then, Amesh, the two goons, and Sidney Winegrass came down the stairs. Winegrass was dressed in a tailored black suit, white shirt, and a red tie. He was lean, with dark hair slicked back from his forehead, giving him a wolfish appearance. "Michael, turn on some lights," he ordered. "I want to see what I'm dealing with here." Ameche quickly switched on the single overhead light. Winegrass, hands clasped behind his back, paced around the basement, circling Tanner and me, studying us. "Sid, Mr. Winegrass," Tanner began nervously. "As soon as I get the insurance money, I can pay you back. I just need Max to approve it. He was supposed to get a check from me at my office." He rambled on. So much for sticking together. Winegrass, still with his hands behind his back, addressed us. "Gentlemen, I'm a fair businessman. I try to find deals that work for all parties. I believe that's the best way to do business. Everyone gets a piece of the action," he continued. "But I never want to show weakness. When you show weakness as a businessman, your partners, competitors, even those you thought were friends, will try to take advantage of you. I can't operate like that," he explained. "So now, Mr. Bishop," he said, turning to Tanner, "we agreed you would build me a beautiful home in Hawaii. I love the idea of a home in a tropical location. I gave you the money. And what did you do? You spent it on another house, which then burned down. And now you tell me there's no insurance? Is that right?" he asked. Tanner kept babbling about the insurance company, how I was supposed to get a check, and that it could all be sorted out, but his desperation made him incoherent. Winegrass clapped his hands for silence. "Mr. Early," he says, nodding in my direction. "As the insurance man, it's your responsibility to take care of your client, Mr. Bishop." He nods towards Tanner. "And Mr. Bishop claims that it's your fault he isn't insured. Now, Mr. Bishop has declared bankruptcy, and I am left without the tropical home I paid for. So I ask you both, is that fair?" He looks back and forth between Tanner and me. Tanner immediately starts his usual spiel about how it was my job to collect the check, insisting it's not his fault, and so on. I can see that Winegrass is getting angry. The more Tanner tries to make excuses, the angrier Winegrass becomes. Finally, he turns to Amesh. "Get rid of them both," he says, heading towards the stairs. Tanner panics, struggling and repeating the same old excuses about how it wasn't his fault. Winegrass keeps walking towards the stairs as the goons advance on Tanner and me. "Mr. Winegrass," I say, speaking up for the first time, though it's hard to articulate with my swollen face. "May I ask you a question?" He pauses and turns slightly towards me, nodding as if to say, "Go ahead." "As a businessman, you probably have insurance on your assets, including your property," I say. Winegrass doesn't respond, but I can tell he's listening. "Let me ask you this. Does your insurance agent come to your office to collect the premium check, or do you or someone in your office send it off when it's due?" He's staring at me. Tanner tries to interrupt, but he's told to shut up. "One more question," I continue. "If you have a tenant renting real estate from you and they don't pay when they're supposed to, is that your fault?" Winegrass starts nodding slightly, as if he's beginning to understand my point. "If you would allow it, and just free one of my hands, I'd like to show you something else." He nods at the first goon to cut the duct tape. I carefully pull my iPhone out of my pocket and hand it to the goon. "The premium was due on October 15th, I say, while Winegrass is now examining my iPhone. As you can see, I sent him reminders about the premium on October 6th, 8th, and 13th. If you check my sent emails, you'll see that I also emailed him on October 9th and 11th, emphasizing the importance of the payment. I tell him, as Winegrass focuses on what I assume are my emails to Tanner. "I agree with you," I say to Winegrass. "Part of my job is to manage my clients. In my view, contacting them 5 times within a week should certainly provide ample opportunity for them to pay for the service I am offering. I think that's fair." "Don't you?" I ask. He looks away, nodding, with his finger tapping his lips as he thinks. Finally, he turns to Amesha. "Michael, take Mr. Early back to his vehicle," he instructs Amesha. "And Mr. Early, not a word of this to anyone. Be aware that I know where you live, where you work, and who is close to you. Do I make myself clear?" he asks. I nod silently in agreement. As much as I want to report this, I don't want to live in fear and constantly looking over my shoulder. As Amesh and I leave, Tanner is pleading desperately for his life. I feel no remorse. "Max, please," is the last thing I hear as we exit the grimy cellar. On the way home, Ameshe tries to be friendly. "Hey, no hard feelings, pal. Business is business," he says with a forced chuckle. I remain silent. After a moment, he continues. "I guess we can call it even. You broke my leg, and I busted up your face a little." Another fake chuckle. I stay silent the entire way. Amesh gives up on small talk. On one hand, I'm extremely relieved not to face the same fate as Tanner. On the other hand, I've never liked Amesh, and he took great pleasure in beating me. As I get out of the car, Amesh leans across the seat and says through the open passenger door, "Remember what Mr. Winegrass said, not a word about any of this." I stare at Amesh and give a brief nod. As I look at him, I think to myself that, while I'm not sure where or when, I will get my revenge. Months later, The sun felt wonderful as I gazed at the shimmering blue water of my swimming pool. Part of my deal with Greg Boston, my builder friend who developed the property, included having my own home. I had chosen a half-acre plot with a south-facing backyard on the highest part of the land. He designed a stunning single-level mid-century modern house with a resort-style backyard and this gorgeous pool. The divorce had been tough. My lawyer did an excellent job ensuring that I didn't have to share any of Aunt Helen's estate with Anna, who tried hard to claim a share. I did end up writing her a check, but it was much less than she demanded. Last I heard, she was still resentful about it. My thoughts wandered, as they often do, to our relationship. I was reflecting on the night Anna, Tanner, and I discussed our dreams. In hindsight, none of us achieved what we wanted. Tanner wanted to be wealthy, Anna aimed for fame, and I just wanted a peaceful life with my business and my wife. Tanner wasn't rich and was likely no longer alive. Anna wasn't famous, and the opportunity with KPAL had faded away. I remembered saying that I would never be rich, but I was wrong. With the sale of the property, I quickly became a multimillionaire. And of course, I didn't have the quiet life with my wife that I had once desired. It bothered me at times, but I was growing accustomed to my bachelor lifestyle. At that moment, I looked up and saw my latest girlfriend coming out topless from the far end of the pool. I smiled. "Max," the young Brittany asked, "could you put some sunscreen on me?" I smiled, realizing that I was indeed getting comfortable as a bachelor. The ballroom buzzed with activity, and everyone was dressed in elegant evening attire. My date for the evening, Kai, looked breathtaking in a black miniskirt. The room was filled with numerous round tables. The annual Children's Charity Ball was one of the premier social events of the year. Across the room, I spotted Sidney Winegrass with a younger, attractive woman who appeared to be at least a decade his junior. I made a point of heading towards his table to shake his hand. Initially, he didn't recognize me. Last time he saw me, I was in a pretty bad state. Once he did recognize me, he was polite and courteous as ever. I quickly established my alibi and left. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned to head back to my table and the mini-skirted Kai. I needed to wash my hands. Later that night, in another part of town, Michael Amesh stumbled out of a downtown bar, likely having had a drink or two over the legal limit. He entered the parking garage and struggled to find his keys. Noticing that the corner of the garage was darker than usual, he saw a small, dark figure, his face obscured by the shadows, leaning against the front fender of Amesh's Chrysler. "Move it, Chief," Amesh said to the man. The figure stood up, glaring at Amesh, and two more men emerged from the shadows. The first attack was a lightning-fast jab from the small man. Another jab followed, and then another. Amesh had no chance. He was beaten unconscious. As the first man continued to kick the lifeless Amesh, one of his accomplices quietly urged, "Angel, let's go. We need to leave."